Hello, my friends. Welcome back to Slow English Stories. In the vast, complex world of mathematics, one tiny symbol, a simple circle, a perfect, unbroken loop, holds the weight of everything we know. It is the number 0. Yet, for thousands of years, humanity managed to build entire civilizations, empires, and monumental wonders without ever knowing it existed. Think about the great civilizations of the past. The Romans, the Greeks, the Egyptians, they built empires that spanned continents. They built wonders of stone and marble that still stand today, defying time and gravity. They charted the seas, they governed millions, they composed epic poetry that we still recite. But they struggled to calculate the simplest things. Why? Because they were missing something invisible. They were missing nothing. Imagine a Roman merchant trying to keep his ledgers. He has a system of letters: I, V, X, L, C, D, M. It is a system built for counting objects one by one: sheep, soldiers, coins. It is a system that works perfectly when you have 5 loaves of bread or 10 bushels of wheat. But what happens when you have nothing? How do you account for a debt that has been paid off? How do you handle a calculation that results in no remainder? The Romans had to invent complex workarounds, linguistic tricks, and manual counting methods that made even basic accounting a grueling, slow, and error-prone process. They built the Colosseum, yet they couldn't easily calculate the volume of the space within it using their own arithmetic. They were constrained, not by a lack of intelligence, but by a lack of an abstraction. They were missing the 0. To understand the birth of 0, we have to stop thinking about numbers as simple tools for counting. The ancient Indian mathematicians, they didn't just see a number, they saw a philosophy. They called it Shunya. In Sanskrit, this doesn't just mean nothing. It means the void, the absolute stillness that exists before something is created. While other cultures were busy counting how many sheep they had or how many soldiers were in their army, the Indian mind was looking at the spaces in between. They were fascinated by the concept of akasha, the ether, the space that holds everything together but is itself intangible. This was a radical shift in consciousness. In a culture where you spend hours sitting in silence, observing your own breath, observing your own thoughts, you begin to see that even your thoughts arise from silence and return to silence. You begin to understand that emptiness is not the opposite of fullness, it is the container for it. When they turned this philosophical concept into a mathematical one, it wasn't a calculation. It was a realization. They didn't invent nothingness. They simply gave it a name, and more importantly, they gave it a seat at the table of mathematics. Imagine you are a scholar in an ancient Indian university, perhaps Nalanda or Taxila. You aren't just memorizing formulas. You are debating the nature of reality. You are asking, where do numbers come from? And the answer you arrive at is that they come from the void. You see the number 9, the number 8, the number 7, but you see them as layers of reality built upon a deeper, more fundamental layer, the layer of the Shunya. This mindset allowed them to see what others could not. Because they weren't afraid of the nothing, they didn't push it away. They didn't treat it as a sign of error or a gap in their understanding. They embraced it. They treated it with the same respect they treated the numbers 1 through 9. And in doing so, they unlocked a door that had been locked for the rest of humanity for millennia. They looked at their counting boards and realized that if you have a place for 1 and a place for 10 and a place for 100, you need a symbol to tell you when a place is empty. A symbol to ensure that 101 is not confused with 11. That empty space, that void, needed a marker. It needed to be dignified. And And so Shunya became the marker. It became the guardian of place. If Shunya was the spark of inspiration, then the men who gave it a mathematical identity were the engineers of a new reality. We are talking about two giants who walked the Indian soil centuries apart, two visionaries whose work would eventually change the trajectory of human progress, Aryabhata and Brahmagupta. Imagine it is the 5th century. The world is vast, fragmented, and largely governed by the cycles of the seasons. Aryabhata sits in his observatory, the night air cool against his skin, looking up at the tapestry of the stars. He is not just observing, he is calculating the movement of the heavens. He is tracking the planets as they dance across the dark canvas of space. He realizes something profound. To map the universe, to predict where a star will be 100 years from now, he needs a system that doesn't just count items, but accounts for positions. He needs a language that can handle the sheer magnitude of cosmic time. Aryabhata didn't just stumble upon the zero. He refined the positional system that was already whispering in the background of Indian mathematics. He understood that a number's value is not fixed, it is fluid. It changes based on where it stands in a sequence. A 1 is just a unit, but a 1 followed by a space, a marker of position, becomes 10. This was the aha moment of human history. By utilizing a place value system, he could represent numbers of any size, from the smallest grain of sand to the distance of a galaxy, using only a handful of symbols. This system was the first true step toward the abstraction that would later define our modern world. It was a bridge between the physical and the infinite. But if Aryabhata laid the foundation, the true architect of the zero we recognize today was a man named Brahmagupta in the 7th century. While others were still using empty spaces or dots as placeholders, Brahmagupta sat down in Ujjain and wrote the rules of the game. He treated zero not as a vague concept or a mere gap in a sequence, but as a formal number with its own set of rigid laws. Think about the sheer audacity of this logic. To declare that nothing could be added, subtracted, or multiplied was to challenge the very nature of existence as understood by the ancient mind. Most cultures of the time were comfortable with positive integers because they reflected the physical world, apples, goats, and gold coins. But Brahmagupta's rules allowed for the inclusion of the abstract. He wasn't counting apples anymore. He was building a syntax for logic. He was creating a set of rules that could govern the intangible. Because of these men, math shifted from a descriptive tool used primarily to inventory grain in a warehouse or count cattle in a field, into a language of the cosmos. The beauty here is in the simplicity of their rules. They didn't create a complex system that required a lifetime of study to memorize. They created a framework that could be taught, spread, and eventually adopted by everyone, from the merchant in the market to the astronomer in the royal court. By defining the zero so clearly, Aryabhata and Brahmagupta didn't just solve a local problem of arithmetic. They provided the essential key that would eventually unlock the secret doors of the entire modern digital era. We often credit the modern world for its computational power, for the speed at which we can transmit information across the globe. But the algorithms that run our screens today, the very logic that allows you to listen to this voice right now, are simply echoes of the rules Brahmagupta etched onto parchment nearly 1,500 years ago. It is a humbling thought, isn't it, that the most advanced technology you own, your smartphone, the laptop on your desk, the servers powering the internet, is essentially a fast-forward version of an ancient Indian equation. Here is the reality of the long-term transformation. When zero was finally integrated into the global system, it didn't just change how we counted grain or gold. It fundamentally rewired how we perceive reality itself. Once mathematics became an engineering language, we no longer just observed the world. We started to predict it. Think about the shift. When you have a placeholder for nothing, you can suddenly define the trajectory of a falling apple, the velocity of an arrow, or the orbit of a planet. You are no longer reacting to nature, trying to survive in a world you don't understand. You are calculating it. You are mapping the future. You are asserting control over the chaotic movements of the universe. You see this in your daily life. You expect the phone to work. You expect the stock market to move in a predictable way. You expect the data to align perfectly. The moment there is a glitch, a moment of true uncalculated chaos, the entire system panics. We have become so dependent on the zero-defined reality that we lose our footing when we face the raw, uncalculated beauty of genuine unpredictability. Have you ever stopped to wonder what is actually happening when you tap a screen? When you type a message, when you scroll through a feed, when you watch a video? You see color, you see movement, you see the faces of your loved ones or the words of an author. You see a world that feels incredibly complex, full of depth and meaning. But underneath that surface, beneath the glass and the plastic, there is no magic. There is only a language built entirely on the foundation of the zero. It comes down to one of the most elegant yet terrifyingly simple breakthroughs in human history: binary code. Imagine a vast room, a warehouse so large you cannot see the walls. Inside this room, there are billions of tiny, microscopic light switches. Each switch has only two states. It is either on or it is off. It is either letting the current flow or it is blocking it. That is the sum total of the computer's intelligence. It does not know poetry, it does not know art, it does not know pain or joy. It only knows, is the current flowing or is it stopped? Think about the irony. We look at artificial intelligence today, the chatbots, the generative tools, the algorithms that predict our behavior, and we call it the future. We treat it like an alien intelligence that has arrived to change our world. But this future was baked into the foundation of reality long ago, in the quiet meditation halls of the East. Every time you tap a screen, you are essentially activating a long, complex chain of events that relies on the fundamental rules defined by an ancient scholar who never saw a light bulb, never saw a wire, and never saw a computer. So, the next time you hold your phone, the next time you see the blinking cursor on a screen, or the next time you stare at the digital clock as it ticks away your life, remember the invisible giant that sits behind every pixel. Remember the Shunya. It is there, holding the weight of your entire digital world, patiently waiting for you to realize that its true power is not just in calculating the world, but in letting you define your own position within it. How often do you look at your own life and feel that you are standing at zero? Perhaps you've hit a point where your old career is gone, or a relationship has ended, or your plans have simply fallen apart. You feel the weight of that nothingness. You feel the void. But I want you to look at that moment differently. That empty space is not a vacuum where you disappear. It is the positional space where you can finally decide where you want to go. It is the Shunya, the stillness, where you can stop being defined by your past digits, your past successes, or your past mistakes. If you want to build something lasting in your own reality, stop trying to count more items. Start focusing on the position of your focus. Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. And if this deep dive into the hidden history of our world has sparked a new perspective for you, make sure to subscribe. Thank you for listening to Slow English Stories. See you in the next one.